Most people think hard work is what lifts a life. A lot of the time it is not. A lot of the time it is what keeps a life pinned in place. That is the part nobody likes to say out loud because it sounds ungrateful or bitter or lazy. But look around for 5 minutes and tell me it is not true. The men with bad backs, the women doing double shifts, the worker who leaves before sunrise and comes home too tired to think, the couple juggling rent, groceries, insurance, and one surprise car repair that wipes out the month. These are not people avoiding effort, these are people drowning in it. And yet many of them never get ahead, not because they are foolish, not because they lack character, and not because they did not want it badly enough. They stay stuck because labor can keep you alive while still preventing you from building a life. That is the trap. And once you see it clearly, you stop asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, why isn't hard work paying off? The better question is, why does the structure punish the very people carrying the most weight? Because that is what is happening, quietly, repeatedly. For years at a time, a lot of people are not poor because they refuse to work. They are poor because they are caught inside a machine that converts their time, energy, health, and attention into survival, then leaves them too depleted to build anything beyond survival. That machine has a few different parts. And if you do not name them, you spend half your life blaming yourself for injuries caused by the design. The first part is simple. It is the wage cage. That is what I call the life where every dollar depends on your continued motion. You stop, the money stops. You get sick, the money weakens. You burn out, the income shakes. You lose the job, the whole structure starts rattling in the wind. People hear that and say, well, that is just how work works. Yes, exactly. That is the problem. When all your income depends on your body showing up, your mind staying sharp, your schedule staying full, and your employer continuing to want you, then you do not own an income. You rent one, and it can be taken back. That is not freedom. That is dependency with a dress shirt on. A man making $50,000 can live in that cage. A man making $150,000 can live in that cage too. The salary changes. The structure often does not. That is why so many people with respectable income still live with private fear. They look stable. They sound stable. They may even tell themselves they are stable. But underneath, they know one layoff, one medical problem, one parent needing help, one transmission failure, one run of inflation, and the whole thing gets tight fast. Because income is not the same thing as security. Security is what remains when life interrupts your earning. A lot of people never learn that until middle age. By then, they have spent 20 years chasing bigger paychecks when what they really needed was margin. Margin is breathing room. Margin is time. Margin is options. Margin is the ability to take a hit without becoming smaller. And hard work by itself does not create margin. In many cases, it destroys it. Because the second part of the trap is what I call the exhaustion tax. This one is cruel because it hides inside normal life. When a person is worn down enough, he starts paying just to keep going. Not for luxury, for relief. He grabs takeout because he is too tired to cook. He buys little rewards because the day felt punishing. He upgrades something he cannot really afford because he wants one corner of life to feel decent. He pays late fees because his mind is scattered. He keeps subscriptions running because he does not have the energy to sort through them. He spends on convenience because fatigue makes cheap things harder, not easier. That is the exhaustion tax. The world charges tired people extra, not always in one dramatic blow, more often in 100 quiet leaks, a fast food dinner here, a higher grocery bill there, coffee on the road, impulse purchases on a Friday night after a week that felt like punishment, a credit card balance that stays around because there is never enough mental space to deal with it cleanly. A home repair delayed until it becomes a bigger repair, a body pushed too hard, then a prescription added to keep the machine running. People like to pretend spending is always about discipline. It is not. A lot of spending is pain management in a cleaner outfit. And when someone is working all the time, especially under stress, that pain management starts to feel earned. That is where years disappear, not in wild recklessness, in ordinary compensation. A little comfort now, a bigger cost later. That pattern ruins more households than dramatic stupidity ever will. Then comes the third part, the bandwidth collapse. This is where hard work becomes more than tiring, it becomes blinding. When a person lives in constant pressure, his decisions get smaller. Not because he is weak, Because pressure shrinks the horizon. You stop thinking 5 years out and start thinking Friday. You stop asking what builds leverage and start asking what avoids disaster. You stop planning and start reacting. That changes everything. It changes what you buy, what you tolerate, what risks you can take, what skills you can build, what conversations you are willing to have, what future you can even imagine. A person in survival mode does not make strategic decisions. He makes urgent decisions. That is why the old advice sounds so hollow to people under real pressure. Learn new skills. Start a side business. Invest in your future. Take calculated risks. All of that sounds fine from a clean room. Try hearing it when your knees hurt, your checking account is thin, your kid needs school supplies, the air conditioner is making a strange noise, and your phone lights up with another bill. People are not always trapped by ignorance. A lot of the time they are trapped by depleted bandwidth. They know more than outsiders think. They just do not have enough unbroken attention to convert insight into structure. And structure is the whole game. That is the sentence too many people miss. Structure beats effort. Not because effort is worthless, because effort without structure gets consumed. That is why some people spend their lives in motion and still never gain lift. Their energy goes in, but the system around them leaks too badly to hold progress. A raise helps, then rent goes up. Overtime helps, then the car needs tires. A bonus helps, then dental work shows up. A second job helps, then the person gets too tired to manage anything well. The money comes in, the weakness in the structure takes it back. So what are people taught to do? Work harder. That advice survives because it sounds honorable. It flatters the speaker and burdens the listener. It turns a structural problem into a moral test. If you are still struggling, maybe you did not push enough. Maybe you lacked grit. Maybe you were not hungry enough. Maybe you made excuses. No. Sometimes the truth is uglier and simpler. Sometimes a person is working inside a system that rewards ownership, punishes fragility, and pays labor just enough to keep showing up. And that leads to the fourth part of the trap, the owner's escalator. This is where the game really separates. Labor earns by motion. Ownership earns by position. That is the dividing line. If you sell hours, there is always a ceiling. Maybe it is a low ceiling. Maybe it is a fairly high one. But it is still a ceiling because your income remains tied to presence, output, health, and time. Ownership is different. Ownership means the thing can keep producing even when you are not actively pushing it minute by minute. A rental property, a business system, a set of shares, a piece of intellectual property, a product, a small operation that works without your hands on every wheel all day. That is why the conversation around wealth gets so slippery. People point to hardworking, successful people and confuse effort with cause. No, in many cases, effort helped them manage, protect, or grow what they owned. But ownership is what changed the math. A roofer can work 10 brutal hours and still wake up financially exposed. A man with enough assets can spend the day at lunch and still have money arrive. That is not a moral statement, it is a structural one. The system does not mainly reward strain, it rewards control of assets. And once you understand that, a lot of modern life starts making more sense. Why some people get richer in calm, why others get poorer in effort, why one group is penalized by inflation while another group passes costs through, why one family uses credit to survive while another family uses capital to buy weakness when prices drop. The difference is not always intelligence, it is often position. That truth stings because it offends the story people were raised on. Work hard, play fair, stay disciplined. And the rewards will come. Sometimes they do. But for millions of people, hard work mostly produces maintenance. Not escape, not lift, maintenance. Enough to keep the lights on, enough to keep the truck running, enough to keep up appearances, enough to stay in the game without ever changing the game. That is not prosperity. That is managed pressure. And then the fifth part arrives, maybe the most dangerous of all, the respectability trap. This is where people start confusing looking functional with being safe. A decent car payment, a tidy apartment or house, clothes that say things are all right, a phone upgrade, a few dinners out, a vacation financed more by hope than by cash, a life that photographs better than it feels. This trap is deadly because it lets a person feel normal while the structure underneath stays weak. And weak structure is expensive. It means every problem hits harder, every surprise costs more, every interruption becomes emotional. Every bad month threatens the next one. A lot of middle-class pain comes from this exact place. Not total collapse, not visible poverty, just chronic fragility hidden behind respectable surfaces. These are the households where two incomes come in and somehow it still feels tight, where raises disappear without changing anything, where retirement accounts exist but are too small to calm anyone, where the mortgage gets paid but the sense of safety never fully arrives, where the family looks fine to everybody else and privately feels one serious event away from panic. That is the respectability trap. It tells people to keep the picture clean while the foundation cracks. And the longer that goes on, the more a person starts thinking fatigue is adulthood. It is not. Adulthood is not constant strain. It is not needing everything to go right. It is not being one mishap away from fear. It is not working so hard that you need to spend money just to recover from the life required to earn the money. That is not maturity. That is a well-decorated trap. Now, hearing all this, some people swing too far in the other direction. They say, so what? Working hard is pointless? No, that is not the lesson. The lesson is that labor by itself does not produce freedom. It can produce income. It can build discipline. It can keep disaster away. It can buy time. And in some seasons of life, that matters more than anything. But if all your effort goes into maintaining someone else's machine while none of it goes into building even a small form of ownership, then you can spend 30 years becoming more capable without becoming much safer. That is the tragedy. Not that people worked hard, that they worked hard in a direction that never changed the underlying structure. And this is where things turn, because once you stop worshiping effort for its own sake, you can start asking better questions. Not, how can I work even harder? But what part of my work builds something I keep? Not how do I look more successful, but how do I become less fragile? Not how do I squeeze more out of myself, but how do I stop leaking so much life into systems that do not strengthen me? That shift matters. A man can change his life a long time before he gets rich. He changes it the moment he stops confusing motion with progress. He changes it when he starts protecting bandwidth like an asset, when he stops spending his best energy on appearances, when he starts building reserve instead of image, when he takes ownership seriously, even if the first version is small enough to feel almost unimpressive. Because that is how real stability begins, not with glamour, with friction reduction, a paid-off high-interest card, a smaller lifestyle than the paycheck technically allows, a cash buffer that prevents small emergencies from turning into debt, a side skill with actual market value, a habit of buying time back instead of status, a decision to keep one old car a few years longer so money can accumulate somewhere that matters, a refusal to let every raise become a permanent expense. That may sound plain. Good. Most useful things do. The truth is, many people do not need a miracle first. They need escape velocity. They need enough structural improvement that life stops dragging them backward every time they try to move forward. That begins with margin. Margin in the bank, margin in the calendar, margin in the nervous system, margin in the monthly budget, margin in the expectations they place on themselves. Then it moves to ownership, not fantasy ownership, not daydreams about becoming a mogul, real ownership, something small that can grow, something modest that belongs to you, something that keeps producing after the shift ends. Maybe that starts with a simple investing habit. Maybe it starts with a small business done with restraint. Maybe it starts with learning one skill that separates your value from raw hours. Maybe it starts with creating something once and getting paid for it more than once. Maybe it starts by cutting enough waste and exhaustion spending to finally free up capital. The form can vary. The principle does not. You cannot outwork a structure that takes everything your labor produces and leaves you nothing durable. At some point, your effort has to stop being rented and start being stored. That is what ownership does. It stores effort. A saved dollar stores effort. A productive asset stores effort. A business system stores effort. A useful skill with leverage stores effort. A reduced fixed cost life stores effort. A paid-off burden stores effort by stopping future extraction. That is why some older people look calm in a way younger strivers do not understand. It is not always because they made more. Sometimes it is because they finally learned how to stop bleeding. That lesson changes a face, it changes a marriage, it changes sleep, it changes the tone of a home, because peace does not come mainly from having a flashy life. It comes from needing less heroism every month. That may be the whole thing in one sentence. A lot of people are living as if the goal is to become rich. For most ordinary people, the first real victory is simpler than that. The first real victory is to stop being easy to knock over. Stop being so exposed. Stop being so financed. Stop being so dependent on perfect continuity. Stop needing every paycheck to arrive on time and every appliance to cooperate and every body part to keep working and every employer to stay generous. That is not glamorous work. It is adult work. And it is more powerful than people think. Because once fragility drops, judgment improves. When judgment improves, decisions improve. When decisions improve, money stops leaking. When money stops leaking, options increase. When options increase, fear loosens. And when fear loosens, a person can finally think beyond the next emergency. That is when life begins to change shape. Not overnight, not all at once, but in a way that lasts. So, no, hard work does not automatically make people rich. Sometimes it does something sadder than that. Sometimes it uses them up before they ever get a chance to build a life that can hold them. That is why you have to be careful what your effort is feeding. A job can feed your family. Good, let it do that. But do not let it consume your whole future. Do not let it trick you into believing that strain is the same thing as strategy. Do not let it convince you that looking responsible is the same thing as being secure. And do not let anyone shame you into worshiping labor while they quietly build their lives on ownership, margin, and leverage. Work hard, yes, but be very particular about where that hard work goes. Let some of it go toward reserve. Let some of it go toward reducing fixed costs. Let some of it go toward protecting your mind. Let some of it go toward building something you keep. Let some of it go toward a life that gets steadier instead of merely busier, because the goal is not applause. It is not image. It is not proving you can endure more punishment than the next man. The goal is to become harder to corner. The goal is to build a life with enough structure that bad luck does not instantly become chaos. The goal is to reach a point where your money is not only something you earn, but something that also defends you. That is when work starts serving you instead of simply draining you. And that is when a person begins to feel something rare these days. Not excitement, not status, relief, quiet, earned relief, the kind that comes when the bills no longer feel like predators, when one setback does not ruin the month, when you stop performing stability and begin living it, when your future is no longer hanging by a thread tied to your next paycheck. That is a better ambition than glamour. It is more mature, more durable, and for most people, a whole lot more life-changing. If any part of this felt uncomfortably familiar, that is probably because you were never failing in the way you were told. You may have simply been working inside the wrong logic. And once you see that clearly, you can begin to do something far more powerful than just work harder. You can start building a life that does not need to keep proving its strength by surviving damage. That is how people stop being trapped. Not by becoming superhuman, by becoming structurally harder to break. And if you have been carrying more than your share for a long time, that may be the truth worth keeping. So in the end, the lesson is not that hard work has no value. It does. Hard work can feed a family, keep the lights on, and carry a person through hard seasons. But hard work alone does not create real wealth if all it does is keep you running in place. If your effort only pays today's bills but never builds tomorrow's safety, then the problem is not your character. It is the structure, and that is the deeper lesson here. A man can spend years being responsible, disciplined, and exhausted, and still be building nothing that truly protects him. That is why money is not just about income. It is about margin, ownership, and the quiet self-respect that comes from knowing your life is getting steadier, not just busier. So maybe the practical place to start is very simple. Sit down this week and ask yourself one honest question. What part of my effort is actually becoming something I keep? Maybe that means cutting one expense that only buys temporary relief. Maybe it means starting a small cash buffer. Maybe it means putting even a little money into something that can grow without more hours from you. Small steps matter when they change the structure. Here's the question I'd like to leave with you. What has kept you working hard without really moving ahead? If you have a thought on that, share it in the comments. Your perspective may help someone else see their own situation more clearly. And if this kind of grounded, honest conversation speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. It helps support the work and it encourages more thoughtful content like this.